Welcome to a special edition of Critical Issues, Alternative Views. I'm Ron Kramer. I'm the host of the program. I'm a professor of sociology at Western Michigan University. Joining me today, as usual, on our Critical Issues team is Denise Keel. Denise is a professor of political science at Western. She's also involved with the Institute of the Environment and Sustainability, and she chairs the Climate Change Working Group on campus. Joining us today for this special edition is Matt Longjohn. Matt is the Democratic candidate in the 6th Congressional District, and we're going to offer a couple of segments today to get into some of the issues involving the 2018 campaign. So Matt, for this first segment, we'd like you to talk a little bit about yourself, tell us a little bit about your background, and why you decided to throw your hat into the ring, as they say.
Great. Well, Ron, Denise, thanks for having me today. 31 days from now, the day we're recording, we'll have people going to the ballot box. And, you know, I never thought I would see my name on a ballot. It was never my goal. It was never my career path. I'm a 5th generation member of this community. My great-great-grandparents walked here as farmers set down, really planted the family in Vicksburg. And been here since 1861, both my mom's side, my dad's side. It's an agrarian, agricultural, farming family, a working class family, a military family, a union family, and never once thought that I would either be running for office or have the opportunity to speak on these issues as I am today. But as someone who went to medical school after going to Kalamazoo College, growing up here in the area, I went to medical school with the idea of helping as many people as possible to live their healthiest lives. I thought I might have a career in organizations like Doctors Without Borders, practicing medicine in Syria or Bangladesh or someplace where medicine was clearly needed. As a single father, I decided that I needed to, after getting my medical degree and obtaining $250,000 worth of debt to have that medical degree, that I also needed a master's of public health. Because as a single dad, I knew I wasn't going to be practicing medicine in Syria or something like that, and found a path for myself, a career path for myself and my son, where I was working on community health initiatives, first in Chicago and then here and then across the country to help people live healthier lives. And it was not until February of last year, 2017, when anyone ever really mentioned that I should think about running for office, and specifically against Fred Upton. But it was after years of Republican efforts to repeal and maybe not replace the Affordable Care Act, or as policy debates were kicking off last summer about repealing insurance coverage requirements for existing conditions, pre-existing conditions and essential health benefits, that I began to listen to some folks who were saying, you know, you should think about running. And once Mr. Upton not only voted for cutting pre-existing conditions coverage, but actually put his name on the bill that would have resulted in 40,000 Southwest Michigan families losing their insurance, that I became convinced that in order to continue my lifelong mission of promoting health and wellness, that I needed to run against and defeat Congressman Upton on November 6th of 2018. I concluded you just could not live your healthiest possible life with Fred Upton in Congress. So my background is as a 5th generation member of this community, as someone who's been working across the country to innovate health reforms, for example, on diabetes prevention or cancer survivorship or falls prevention. I was named one of the top 100 innovators in healthcare innovation in the country just a few weeks before the November 16 election. And now I'm running for Congress, and I think we're doing pretty well, but I need people's help.
Yeah. So you're really running, given your background with the MD, as health as a holistic campaign issue, and health broadly defined as environment, exposures, criminal justice, education. You're really using that as a platform issue. So I'm hoping maybe talk a little bit more about how that separates you from Representative Upton and some of his positions on healthcare over the years, and how you see those policies intersecting, and what you think the future of healthcare could look like if you were elected.
Yeah, I'm running this campaign exactly as you said, to improve the health and quality of life of as many people as possible. And my background isn't a traditional medical career. after graduating from an accredited four-year medical school.
Should we tell people why we're making that point?
Well, apparently Mr. Upton is questioning my ability to use an MD insignia. To me, it's just a play out of President Trump's campaign tactics.
Right.
It's kind of ridiculous and humorous in some ways. It's like demanding to see President Obama's long-form birth certificate or something. I have a diploma with an MD on it that I earned over years of study of medical education. I obtained $250,000 of educational debt in my education. So I earned it, and I'm paying for it still. I walked across the stage with my son in my arms. I was a single dad in medical school to receive that diploma, and it meant a lot to me. And there's no question that legally I'm allowed to use that degree. Mr. Upton wants to use President Trump's tactics to confuse people, to try and create some issue where there is none, citing one section of public health code and ignoring the section that comes right below it that says that I should be allowed to use this degree to describe myself as I've earned it. But regardless of all of that, going back to your question, I see health as a holistic issue. It is something that we have to address holistically. You can't live your healthiest possible life without a healthcare system that's working for you. And as a healthcare innovator, I have some track record and experience and ideas for how to continue to make our healthcare system better. I'll come back to that in a second. But you also have to recognize that our health as people is determined, about 80% of our health is determined not by where we see a doctor in clinic or a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant or whomever in clinic, but by where we live, work, learn, play, and pray. Our lifestyle has so much more to do. Our environmental exposures have so much more to do. Our household economics have so much more to do with our health than just healthcare, that we have to talk about people's health in policy terms that are in a very holistic way. So a couple examples, right? You can't live your healthiest possible life if what's coming out of your water faucet is going to kill you, right? You can't live your healthiest possible life if you're homeless, even if you have a job and aren't earning a livable wage that could allow you to put a roof over your head or your kid's head. You can't live your healthiest possible life if bullets are flying overhead on your way to school. We have to talk about health in a holistic way. And I don't think Mr. Upton has been a holistic, bipartisan or not, leader on issues related to people's health and quality of life. On healthcare specifically, we differ dramatically, Mr. Upton and myself. Having worked in the field of health reform for a long time, I recognize that what we need in healthcare reform is to achieve the quadruple aim of health reform. And that means improving healthcare quality, that means reducing healthcare costs, that means developing a patient-centered healthcare system, and making sure our healthcare system is equitable for everyone. Those are the quadruple aims of health reform. And Mr. Upton's been incoherent in his policy efforts on all of those fronts. We need to close the shortages of doctors and nurses to improve healthcare quality. I've been endorsed by the Michigan Nurses Association in part because I know how important it is to support nurses in hospitals who are the front line of care. We have to recognize that medical errors and drug interactions are actually the third leading cause of death in the United States. So we absolutely need to improve healthcare quality. The second thing that I talked about there was reducing healthcare costs, and that means focusing on prevention. When I was the National Health Officer for all the 2,700 YMCAs in the country, the first physician to have a national leadership role at the Y in its 173-year history, my team created a community jobs program that prevented up to 71% of new cases of diabetes in the Medicare population and paid for itself 5 times over with Medicare investment and innovation. We know a lot of the answers on how to bend the healthcare cost curve. It also includes taking some corporate money out of healthcare. We need to make sure that Medicare is allowed to negotiate for lower drug prices, for example. Right now, something is prohibited from doing because corporate lobbyists and folks like Fred Upton have voted to allow taxpayer dollars to go into shareholder value in pharmaceutical companies. So improving healthcare quality, reducing healthcare costs. We need to make sure a patient-centered healthcare system is what we're advancing. And that means paying for outcomes, not just volume. The reason why we have 15-minute doctor encounters or clinic encounters, or the reason why hospitals are investing so much into things like operating rooms and treatment centers is because the payment system is aligned around volume right now. We need to change that to be about outcomes so that providers are reimbursed best when outcomes are achieved for people in their health. If someone needs a new hip or a knee, for example, I think that orthopedists and the surgery centers, et cetera, should be paid maybe 60, 90 days after the procedure when people can demonstrate increased walking ability and function. Those kinds of patient-centered outcome measures should be part of how we pay for things. And the last aim of that quadruple aim was equity. We can't leave people behind in this healthcare system. We have to overserve people who are underserved and recognize the risk that we all have in an insurance system, a healthcare finance system, where one farming accident, one sick aunt, one thing can kind of knock our whole family's balance off whack and budgetarily lead to bankruptcy. We have to make sure that we're overserving the underserved and managing those risks for people. Mr. Upton is nowhere on those things. And in fact, he put his name on the bill, the Upton Amendment, to cut coverage for pre-existing condition and essential health benefits. If it weren't for John McCain and his thumbs down vote several months after Mr. Upton's bill went through the House, we'd all be at much greater risk.
And it was Upton's vote that even got it to the Senate, because that bill was not even going to pass in the House until Fred changed his position and offered that amendment and got it back to on track.
That's exactly right, Ron. It was, I think, a Tuesday when Congressman Upton said that he would never vote for the American Health Care Act. And on a Wednesday, he went into the Oval Office and met with President Trump and a couple other Republicans and then wrote the Upton Amendment that, for a token political gesture, bought his vote. We need people in Washington who aren't beholden to corporate interests or to party leadership. We need a new generation of leader in Washington who's going to be putting people first. And again, that's something where I have a great contrast to offer against Congressman Upton, who is now taking 80% of his campaign war chest sometimes from corporate PACs. I don't take a penny of corporate money. And who will stand up to party leadership. He's got almost 100% voting record with Speaker Ryan's agenda, and in votes like healthcare or the tax bill, will consistently put party or corporate interests in front of people's interests.
Fred is, we just have a couple minutes left in this first segment, but Fred has been running a couple of ads touting his healthcare positions. How do you respond to the ads that he's been running?
Well, anyone who has been in this district for 32 years, while Mr. Upton has been in office 32 years, he's running for his 17th term, would recognize that Fred has changed. His votes no longer match his rhetoric. There was a time where when Fred would say something like that, you could count on him to vote along the lines of his stated policy positions. But when he's advertising as being a bipartisan leader on health, he's not even telling half the story. He's putting his ads out there talking about funding corporate-sponsored research projects to shorten the FDA approval process on experimental drugs and therapies. And that's great. That's something we need to be doing in terms of bringing new therapies to market. The wonderful family that's in his ad that's dealing with two daughters who have spinal degenerative diseases, I don't begrudge them a second of health.
Right.
But it's not an either-or proposition. We need to be funding medical research, and we need to be expanding healthcare to make sure that we're treating everyone equitably.
Okay. Thank you very much, Matt. And that wraps up our first segment. We hope you can stay with us and join us for some additional segments with Matt Longjohn. Thanks.